Now, what you see on the left, this is Betsy. She recently retired. She's actually a professor of biology, but has a very, very deep interest in the Civil War and is very much involved with women in the Civil War. She's on the board of it. Her vita just goes on forever. And there's also a conference every year that is talking about the Civil War and medicine, and she's very much involved. All you have to do is go Google, Betsy Estelow, and you come up with all kinds of information. You will see her again later on. Now, this is where I start to see, in the weight room, they always want to be chiseled. Well, this is not the chisel that we want, at least out in the battlefield. You can see it. This is sort of staged. You can kind of figure that out. But I was trying to figure out, exactly what they were eating. Their plates are pretty empty. But look at this individual right here. Again, we're talking about energy deprivation. He is holding a heart attack. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. Tom mentioned it in his presentation earlier in the series. But just kind of, noting, that type of thing. Also, I tried to find images of their cooking facilities, and obviously they were pretty primitive. Just your basic camping type of facilities. And here's the hardtack, and Tom introduced it earlier, but it's about 3 inches square, about a ½ inch thick, and they would get 9 to 10 crackers per day. And as you might know, it's just flour and water. I think you make flour and water and make glue. I know when I was a kid I did it that way. But what you do is take the flour and the water, you mix it, and then it's a very, very slow bake. And I'm going to try it just because I like to experiment with foods. And so maybe on the last session we have music, I'll bring treats or something. But it was really interesting reading about this. They had one kind of method of eating it called skilly-gally, and it was simply soaked in water and then fried in pork fat. We're talking about a coronary arrest there with that pork fat. And then you can see, again, the samples there. And when I was visiting with Cammie one time, she said, yeah, they still have those. Not exactly like that, but they do have crackers in their supplies. And just a couple of it, they were called worm castles, and the reason for that is that sometimes when they were shipped, they get wet, and then they get basically moldy, and then it attracted the bugs, well, the weevils and that type of thing, and so they put it in their coffee, and then the weevils would, float up, and then they'd, get rid of them. However, they probably should have eaten the weevils. They would have gotten a little bit more nutrition. And I found this. It was just a hoot. This is basically the song, and you can see basically this game, let us close our game of poker, take our tin cups in our hand as we stand by the Kirsten. As dried mummies of hard crackers are handed each man. Oh, hardtack, come again no more. Well, you go through, and then pretty soon, what you see is this. 'Tis the dying wail of the starving, oh hardtack, come again once more. You were old and very wormy, but we can pass our failings o'er. Please come once again. And so it's an interesting little ditty, but it was just talking, they, for entertainment, made songs about their food, right? Now, this is your assignment. In my class, especially on exams, I always do compare and contrast. Compare means that what are the similarities, and contrast are what are the differences. Okay, you've seen this picture before. This is a new picture. What's the differences? Okay, we're going to look at a couple different pots. Here's this pot. Here's that pot. Now, we really can't see what they have, but for the most part, they have a tablecloth. Again, officers had a different lifestyle than basically you're implementing. So again, the health, you have to consider who's fighting, and then of course who's commanding. So, coming back, we had the recruitment of the soldiers. Now we're going to talk about the preparation of the doctors and the lack of sanitation. Whoops, sorry. We're going to have Betsy come back in here.
The military surgeon's place and work are of necessity removed as far as possible from the immediate place of danger and actual scene of conflict. 'Tis not his plan, his campaign, or to lead the charge, or inspire fainting hearts by deeds of personal valor, but faithfully, skillfully, and untimely to minister to the sick, to attend the wounded, and comfort the dying. He understands what the soldier's life finally brings to many: the death wounds, the burning fever, the wasted body, and the broken constitution. He knows what battle means: the shattered limbs, the moan of pain, the long life of war. Surgeon Kathe Gabel, 19th Indiana.
In the 4 bloodiest years of American history, 620,000 soldiers perished from the face of the earth. 2/3 died from disease alone. The medical departments on both sides were totally unprepared for what was about to come, and were about to pay the price in the reality of it all.
To arms! Citizens of Pennsylvania, the rebels are upon us! The President of the United States...
As the South seceded from the Union, patriotism flooded towns as recruitment rallies urged men to join the ranks of the armies. Regiments were formed as bands played and the local politicians reminded citizens of their duty.
I love this.
I was full of mental champagne that comes from the cheering multitudes. Lieutenant Samuel H.M. Byers, 5th Iowa Infantry.
Groups of 100 men volunteered and were organizing into companies. 1,000 men formed a regiment and officers were elected. Usually, one regimental surgeon and 2 assistant surgeons joined the regiments to care for the men.
Medical education at the time of the Civil War was very different than what we now know. Individuals interested in attending medical school would actually gain admittance and would attend lectures, a series of lectures. They would buy tickets for those lectures, and actually that's how the faculty got their money, by selling the tickets to the lectures. They would sit through a series of lectures for the first year, and then the second year they would attend those same lectures again, so they would attend them twice. At the end of that period of time, they were considered to have earned their MD after they had passed an exam, and they would be qualified to go out and practice in any locale and doing any sort of medicine of that day. They did not really receive the same sort of clinical, practical training that we now know of as part of the medical education. Most of that was done as an apprenticeship with a physician in a local area. Medicine in 1860 was really actually in a period of flux. They were moving away from the concept that had been held for actually several centuries of health and disease being a matter of balance of internal humors. And if an individual was suffering from some abnormality, what you needed to do was balance the humors. We're moving into an era of more scientific approach to medicine. However, MD, or what we know of now as the medical doctor, was not the only practicing individual of that time period. In the United States, at the time of the Civil War, not only were there programs for the MD, but homeopathic medicine was in the developmental stages. Hahnemann had been doing his work, and so the concept of homeopathic medicine was important. They also had a field of study called botanic physicians, and these individuals were part medical trained individuals, but partly relying on the concept of various herbs and botanical treatments for different disorders. They also believed in a lot of a good, clean air and water. Keep it clean and individuals tended to get better, and it actually worked because in many cases no one was looking at sanitation and the sanitary aspects. It's very important to realize in 1860 medical science worldwide of any form had yet to delineate the germ theory. In other words, no one had yet made the connection between microorganisms and disease processes. It wasn't going to be until the next 10 to 20 years that scientists Pasteur, Lister, Semmelweis began to come up with the concept of germs being involved actually in infectious disease.
Okay, and then we're going to go on to weaponry. And the mini ball, and Randy, if you wanted to hand those out, he brought mini balls tonight as well as cannonballs. And this, I have a video that's going to show the damage that a mini ball can do. But this will give you a little tactile experience as well, just to get a feel of what these soldiers either experienced on one end or that were shooting with his rifle.
Here at a metalworks in Springfield, Illinois, molten lead is beginning its journey, becoming a lethal instrument of destruction. The bullet known as the mini ball. This crude piece of lead is the primary reason for the unprecedented levels of slaughter in this war. Invented in France, it's an ounce in weight and half an inch across. One person can cast 3,000 mini balls an hour. Each one of these simple bullets can rip through a man's body in a fraction of a second. The mini ball is used by North and South alike. Demand for this killer bullet runs so high that an entire industry springs up, supplying mini balls to the front line. In total, the North makes over 500 million mini balls, ready to be fired from the 2 million muskets it supplies to its men.
In many ways, the Civil War was the first modern war because it was the first war that took place after the Industrial Revolution had begun to transform our country.
It will take over 33 hours for a bullet in this box to travel the 800 plus miles to the battlefield, ready to find its target. The new musket is much faster to reload than traditional weapons. Load the gunpowder, ram down the bullet, and it's ready to fire.
Imagine warfare where your ability to load a musket faster than the guy with the other musket would determine if you lived or died.
Grooves on the inside of the barrel, rifle, spin the ball toward its target. Improved accuracy and range are a deadly combination.
1 second, everything's great. The next second, your buddy's head's gone, or his arm's flying off.
You don't want to know what a soft metal musket ball does when it enters the human body.
On impact, the bullet flattens out. Bone shatters and splinters. Causing further damage to muscle and tissue. More often than not, the result of a direct hit, death. But for all the mini-ball's technological edge, the Army still uses traditional military tactics.
What made it particularly tragic was modern technology meeting much more ancient tactics. So the death rates were truly appalling.